All right, today we're going to continue with our next civilization in the ancient Near East, and a nation that God used to accomplish His purposes in relation to Israel, and that is the nation of Assyria. If you look at the map, you'll see that Mesopotamia is an area close to Assyria. Assyria is to the north of Mesopotamia, primarily. Assyria, from the end of the 10th century BC to the 7th century BC, was the dominant culture, the dominant civilization. They were a dynamic military power in Assyria. They're the first ancient civilization that rightly deserved to be called an empire. The ones we looked at previously did not go way beyond their borders, where Assyria conquered large areas, more than any other civilization before it. At its height, Assyria laid claim to an empire that stretched from Egypt in the west all the way over to Iran in the east. So if you look at this map on the wall here, all the way from Egypt over to here. So that's a way larger area than anyone else had conquered before. For the first time in history, Assyria was the ones that conquered all the land within the realm of one domain, the whole of the Fertile Crescent, from Mesopotamia all the way around to the other side. On this map, from Mesopotamia all the way over. So the whole Fertile Crescent belonged to them. Ashur is the city by which Assyria eventually became known. It was famous for the worship of its chief god, Ashur, who was derived from the Sumerian pantheon. So way back in Sumeria, they had a god named Ashur, and as people moved out from Sumer and settled in the area of Assyria, they brought that god with them. This kingdom was initially established on the cities of Nineveh, Ashur, and Arbel. Those are three main cities. This heartland of the plains contained rich agricultural wealth, but it had no natural boundaries to provide defensible frontiers. So in other words, whereas Egypt had some natural boundaries, you've got the Mediterranean Sea, you've got desert, you've got the rapids. There are no natural boundaries around Assyria, so other groups of people could invade their territory very easily. So the productive grain lands of Assyria offered open and desirable access and rich plunder to any predatory nomads, mountain peoples, or power who, fielding a superior military organization, could impose its own will on the land of Ashur. So they're in constant difficulties with the nations around them. There's always that threat of other nations. The only salvation in the face of such vulnerability lay in the conscious development and maintenance of an effective military that would prosecute vigorous and, when necessary, ruthless offensive campaigns against those enemies who threatened the security of the Assyrian state. So they had to develop a strong military in order to provide safety for themselves against the other nations around, because it was so easy for those other nations to come in. Now, as we consider the development of the civilization of Assyria, it is at the same time that we have the divided nation of Israel called Judah and Israel. The main ruler of Assyria during this time period is Adad-Nahari. Adad-Nahari. He began the Assyrian recovery after some dark ages. So there was a time when civilization was not flourishing, when things were economically not very profitable. And Adad-Nahari is the one that brought back a recovery, brought back a pride among the Assyrians, brought them back into strength. He inspired his people to battle their way out from under their oppressive neighbors. So he rallied the troops against all the invaders. And he pushed control south into Babylon. This is during the time of Rehoboam, king of Judah. Remember, he's the first king of Judah. following Solomon, when the nation divided in two. You might recall that when he came to the throne, Egypt also was trying to make inroads into Judah. Assyria did as well and even sacked Jerusalem in 925. He's followed by Abijam and then Asa. You remember Asa, good King Asa, right? During this time, many faithful migrated to Judah. What's that talking about? Who are the faithful and where'd they come from? They're migrating to Judah.
Israel?
From Israel. So there are many people living in Israel that know that worshiping those golden calves is not a good idea. And so they actually move to Judah. Asa defeats Ethiopia, among other things. Okay, so in Israel, we start out with Jeroboam, remember the first king, and we know, remember some things about him. He led the people of Israel away from the worship of the true God by establishing the golden calf venues in Bethel and Dan. And of course, he sets a bad precedence in Israel for all the kings after him, because as we know, all the kings of Israel were what? Bad or evil. The next emperor that comes on the scene in Assyria is Tukulti-Ninurta. Say that with me. Tukulti-Ninurta. That's hard, isn't it? You know, and I know some of you, especially girls and guys, you should think about this too, are compiling maybe names, possible names for future children that you have. This needs to be on there, I think. This is a good one. Tukulti-Ninurta.
Okay.
There will be no one else in your child's class with that name. Of course, it'll be hard to find magnets with that name on it, but you make do.
Yeah.
Lexi.
Do we have to know?
No. What I'm giving you now is background to where we're going. So none of this is in your notes. Sorry, I didn't mention that before. And you don't need to know these people. This is kind of setting us up for understanding Assyria when they make their revitalization and become a power that deals with Israel, especially. All right. Sorry, I didn't make that clear to begin with. When Tukulti, we'll call him, is ruling, is when Asa continues to reign in Judah, as we see there. In Israel, we have Nadab, who was an evildoer, and of course it just continued to go downhill all the way with the kings of Israel. With Baasha, Elah, Zimri, Omri, just one after another, right? Here's a statue of the next important ruler, Ashur-Nasir-Pal. Now, if you named your kid this, you could either call him Ash, Nasi, or Pal. So you've got a choice of nicknames you can use there. This guy is, this statue is a rare example of an Assyrian statue in the round. In other words, it stands by itself. Placed in the temple of Ishtar. The king's hair and beard are long, which was the fashion of the Assyrian court at the time. See his long hair here and his long beard. Notice he has a sickle in his right hand, like the gods used in fighting monsters. And there's a mace in his left hand, which shows his authority as vice-regent of the supreme god Ashur. The carved cuneiform across his chest proclaims the king's titles and genealogy and mentions his expedition westward to the Mediterranean Sea. All right, so we have Ashur-Nasir-Pal, who was renowned for brutality. We're going to see some of that. He was a great empire builder. He treated Babylon with respect. He expanded their control to Syria, just north of Israel, and he made peace with the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians were not warlike people for the most part. They liked to trade. Okay, again, it's the time of Asa, and then we move on to Jehoshaphat, who was generally a good king, but he allied himself with Ahab, the wicked king in Israel, and went into battle with Syria. Not a good idea. In Israel, we have Omri, Ahab. Remember, Elijah announces a famine. and defeats the prophets of Baal. You may remember the incident where Ahab takes Naboth's vineyard. And here's Ashur-Nasr-Bal in battle. Now, Ashur-Banipal set the standard for those who came after him. And so this is why we're looking at this, because even though this is prior to the Neo-Assyrian Empire that we're going to be concerned with, what he did was what they did. They copied his perspective. So look at this. He became an example of a new philosophy of Assyrian growth. They began to regard themselves as vicars of Ashur, from whom they derived a sense of duty to impose their cult on the whole world. In other words, they said, we are emissaries of the god Ashur, and Ashur wants us to expand his territory. He wants everybody to worship him. And so we're going to conquer all this territory for Ashur. So worship on a holy character. Any enemy of Assyria was viewed as an enemy of Assyria's god and a proper target for massacre. So from this time on, the Assyrian king would routinely launch a new campaign in the spring, purportedly at the command of Ashur. Tribal chiefs, local princelings would often fight bravely, but rarely with success. The Assyrians were good warriors. Those who had no stomach for a fight would often flee or embrace the defeat of the Assyrian king, agreeing to pay a lavish tribute, and on failing to do so, face horrific punishment. There were some that rebelled against Assyria to their own demise. Yet within 50 years, it was maximum expansion, the empire collapsed with remarkable speed. This is because they were overextended, materially exhausted in defending all the territories. They had a lot of internal revolts and civil war within the country of Assyria. So as quickly as Assyria rose, they fell. 612, the Assyrian capital Nineveh was mercilessly sacked and laid waste by the combined arms of the Medes and Babylonians. But there were few who mourned the passing of Assyria. Many would rejoice with the prophet Nahum, who wrote, "All who hear the news of you clap their hands at your downfall, for who has not felt your unrelenting cruelty?" That's the kind of people they were. And it would continue on as we move into the rise of Neo-Assyria. There's a time when Assyria is on the decline. They're no longer a world power. And it's at that time that Jonah is a prophet there. And there's a revival that takes place in Nineveh. But after a time, the next generation forgets about the one true God and goes back to the old ways. And that's the establishment of Neo-Assyria. And they follow on with the same ideas. There are two characteristics, and this is in your notes, two characteristics of Neo-Assyria. First of all, they developed a highly centralized bureaucracy. This helped to prevent a lot of the civil conflict within the country because they had the bureaucracy, all the different aspects of government divided up into different areas, and people were in charge of those areas. So it wasn't just a matter of overthrowing the king. The king was there, the emperor was there, but there were a lot of different people in charge of different areas of government. The second characteristic is continuing on with what the Assyrians did before, and that is they employed mass execution. We're going to look at some of that in a minute. And mass deportation to those that they conquered. If you gave in and surrendered to the Assyrians, then they would take over, but they wouldn't just put a king over you or ruler over you like many of the other civilizations did. They would deport a large portion of your people to some other place and bring people from another place and put them in your country. And why would they do that?
So they don't rebel?
So those people can't rebel. Yeah, because you're less likely to get together with people whose language you don't speak, whose culture you don't share, and say, let's get together and rebel against Assyria. Who are you? You know, and so by mixing people up, they decrease the chances of rebellion. So mass execution and mass deportation was the rule of the day. Now I want to give you some examples of what their bloodthirstiness through some descriptions that are given, written at the time in a temple. Now this comes from Ashur-Nasirpal, who was from the Assyrian Empire, but the Neo-Assyrians followed the same procedures. Look what he said. I felled 50 of their fighting men with the sword, burnt 200 captives from them, and defeated in a battle on the plain 332 troops. With their blood I dyed the mountain red like red wool, and the rest of them the ravines and torrents of the mountain swallowed. I carried off captives and possessions from them. I cut off the heads of their fighters and built a tower before their city. So he took all their heads and built a tower in front of their city. They would do that, build kind of like a pyramid. They'd stack up the heads in front of the city. That would be a warning to anybody else, don't mess with the Assyrians, right? I burnt their adolescent boys and girls. Just burned them alive. And there he is going into battle, directing his troops. You can look at the drawings here and you can see what's happening. Rebellious or disobedient rulers were impaled. What's it mean to be impaled? Anybody know? A little more, yeah, only it's on a stake. A stake is in the ground, and you put the person at the top and just let them come right down on top of the stake. Or stick them first and then put the stake up in the air.
Can't that take weeks for them to die?
Could, yeah. Depending on what organs it hits when that stake goes through. But they're there for everyone to see. Flayed. What's it mean to be flayed?
Skin.
Yeah, skin. So they're skinned alive, and their skins spread over the wall of the city. So you can see this guy looks like he's skinning this person who is tied up there. He said, I flayed as many nobles as had rebelled against me and draped their skins over the pile of corpses. Some I spread out within the pile, some I erected on stakes upon the pile. I flayed many right through my land and draped their skins over the walls. There's a picture of impaling. They're raising a stake with an impaled naked man beside two others. The heads of the captured men of Israel, on this one, this is Israelites sag forward, suggesting they're already dead, but they would still hang there until they rotted, just as a warning to other people. So they had a high culture. They're very cultured. They enjoyed a lot of nice things, but they were also very vicious, as you can see in this the same picture we saw before. Now it looks like he's reaching down inside the guy's mouth. He's pulling his tongue out, maybe. I don't know. Here are the headhunters gathering their prize. Two scribes standing side by side record the number of the enemy slain. And their heads down here at their feet. Read what it says. There's a bronze relief. Severed heads hang from the walls. Flames consume the ancient city near the source of the Tigris River. Beside the city, see a prisoner with no hands and feet. They would do that too, cut off their hands and feet, cut off their nose, cut off their ears, and then put them on a stake. Here's an Assyrian soldier grabbing the hand of a captive, whose other hand and feet have been cut off. Hands and feet littered the ground. That's what he said. There are men, young and old, I took prisoners. Of some I cut off the feet and hands. Of others I cut off the noses, ears, and lips. Of the young men's ears I made a heap. Of the old men's heads I built a minaret, another tower. I exposed their heads as a trophy in front of their city. The male children and the female children I burnt in the flames. The city I destroyed and consumed and burnt with fire. It shows 3 stakes, 8 male heads standing like human totem poles. I filled a wide plain with the corpses of his warriors. These rebels I impaled on stakes. A pyramid of heads I erected in front of the city. I cut their throats like lambs. I cut off their precious lives as one cuts a string. Like the many waters of a storm, I made the contents of their gullets and entrails run down upon the wide earth. My prancing steeds, harnessed for my riding, plunged into the streams of their blood as into a river. The wheels of my war chariot, which runs low, the wicked and the evil, were bespattered with blood and filth. And by filth he means excrement. With the bodies of their warriors I filled the plain like grass. Their testicles I cut off and tore out their privates like the seeds of cucumbers. So the records, they use cuneiform. We have obelisks and stelae, as well as inscriptions on stone slabs.
That's not a good
The king is on top, most powerful person. All public acts are recorded as his achievements. All acts worthy of being recorded are attributed only to the Assyrian king, the focus. And next time we'll get into the rulers of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which will be the ones that deal primarily with Israel. All right, your assignment for Monday is to read and take notes from pages 40 to mid-41. Anything that's on those pages, if there's a place in your notes to put them, just write down anything that fits in there. All right, so not much, because you're only reading a page and a half. Was there anything that matches? Okay. We'll get most of it in class anyway.
Yeah, there was a couple things, but we just went over it.
Yeah.
If I saw this one.
And remember, I'll take your extra credit on Monday, reading in 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings. If you do that reading, counting the time, I will take that on Monday as well. Put how much time you spent reading, and some of the things you learned, some of the things you thought were interesting, just like we talked about in class when we write it down.